Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us tmosso at the1916company.com for pricing. Today we're discussing a 2023 launch from Bremont of England. This is a watch that's very much of the old school Bremont perspective, an attempt to insource as much of the production inside and out to England. So we've got the watch and we've got the model line. It is the H1 Generation Fury, designed in the image of Dirty Dozen, WWW, Ministry of Defense style, 1930s and 40s military aviator timepieces. So, of course, also inspired by the Hawker Sea Fury and the Hawker Fury aircraft, it's got a little bit of both the watch and the aeronautical inspiration. So, taking a quick look, 40 millimeters in diameter in steel. It's 13 millimeters thick, 48.9 millimeters from lug to lug, to put the 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll throw it on my wrist. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, and as you can see, it's a good fit. It's not a huge watch, and it's not super thick either. With a sloped bezel, it should slide underneath a dress cuff, and being neither very complicated nor very large, this is one of the most formal and elegant Bremont timepieces, meaning it could easily be worn with formal attire. This could be your everyday watch regardless of where you work. Taking a look down the barrel, you can see that the lugs are by no means short, being almost 49 millimeter lug to lug, but it doesn't project beyond the edge of my wrist. So I'd recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters in circumference. Once more, mine is 16. Aviator style strap, you can see calfskin in black with a white contrasting stitch. There's some bolstering or stuffing to give it volume. Calfskin on the bottom and a brand new Bremont factory strap. As smooth as butter, really very supple, despite absolutely no crimping, no gouging. It's a wonderfully high-grade piece of leather. Some ask, how do you pronounce the name? Is it Bremont or Bremont? Well, technically it's Bremont, because Bremont, so the legend goes, was a French farmer, and Nick and Giles English, who founded the Bremont Company, landed their vintage aircraft in his field, and out of gratitude for his hospitality, they named their company Bremont. So his name was Bremont, if you believe the lore, and the company is generally pronounced Bremont. Now, buckle, simple, branded, steel, polished. If there's anything interesting about the buckle, it is the fact that it has an elevated bridge, so that when the strap is inside the buckle, you can see how it sits flush inside the buckle rather than adding height on the wrist. Rolling back to the case, this is the well-known Bremont triptych case where the lugs are physically separate from the mid-case portion, and the mid-case is DLC coated with striations, which makes for scratch resistance, but also a nice tonal contrast. Then we have these large, bulbous and rounded lug profiles. You can see that there is a bevel that wraps all the way around, and in fact the character lines of the lugs do wrap all the way around. Taking a look at the crown, it is a screw down. It has the company's propeller logo because the English brothers, who are both English and named English, they love aviation, especially vintage aviation. Screw down crown, 100-meter water resistance here. Taking a look at the dial, it's got a granular base. This is where the WWW, the Dirty Dozen, the MOD design comes in, and the watch draws liberally from 30s and 40s aviation imagery, but it is also said to be inspired by the Hawker Fury and Sea Fury aircraft. So this is the H1 Generation Fury, and in fact you could see H1 inside a power reserve indicator that looks like it might be sub-seconds, and on the original 1940s watches that would in fact have been sub-seconds. Here it traces the 65 hours of power reserve, and in one gratuitous flourish it lets you know that you have that, but I think perhaps we don't need to advertise to the person who already owns the watch. So a little visual tick and a quirk of the watch there. But the H1, of course, very similar to the old H3 logos, which in the day represented a radioactive self-activating luminescent paint. Now today, H1 represents an in-house test that is equivalent to the Swiss COSC. That's something Bremont does, and it's the ISO 3159 driven test. It's a test of the bare movement, but they use the date mechanism and they use the rotor. Not every chronometer test includes the fully built movement. It's almost like the difference between SAE gross and SAE net horsepower. The most accurate measurement of power and accuracy will be with all the accessories fitted. So that is how their in-house chronometer standard is tested. And just remember, ISO 3159 and the COSC, they are the same specifications. COSC is just the Swiss name for it. Dial side, we've got the 3 hands at center. All 3 are loomed. Counterweighted lollipop style. Counterweight with a lancet seconds hand. We have broadsword style hour and minute hands. No shortage of luminescence. Again, all 3 hands loomed. There's a flange outboard or rejo that allows you to read seconds as well as minutes. And then we have the lovely granular base pattern with concentric inside the power reserve down at the base. A little faceted date window, so faceted rather than cut vertically to give a more progressive slope from the plane of the dial to the disc. Now, there are some setting modes here that are of interest. One is the hacking seconds function, which allows you to stop the seconds hand and then set everything precisely to a reference time. There is also a quick set mechanism that adjusts with the crown in the intermediate position when turned in a clockwise direction. And of course, if you do wind manually, you can quickly advance the power reserve indicator down at the bottom. On the back, we have a movement that is largely made in England, and as with most Bremont movements that are described as manufacture, it has its origins in Switzerland. A company called THE Plus had a movement called the K1. Bremont bought the rights to it, made some changes, and insourced as much of the production as possible. We've got a tungsten rotor activating a single barrel and a 65-hour power reserve. We have 22 pivot joules, power reserve indicator, 65 hours, stop seconds, quick set date. You can see that it is a free sprung balance with all adjustments made using little screws in the rim of the balance. So that's very precise. That's an easy balance to adjust precisely, but then it's also more shock resistant than a mobile stud index. Now, what looks at first glance like it might be a single-sided balance cock is actually a dual anchored balance bridge that's a bit asymmetrical in its layout, but it is a dual anchored balance bridge for better shock resistance. It has what you can't see but will appreciate, an anti-magnetic, low-friction, low-mass, unlubricated silicon escapement. And perhaps because of that unusual escapement, it beats at the quirky rate of 25,200 vibrations per hour. You can see the bridges feature a nice tonal contrast as well as a color contrast. This is the ENG 365 from the ENG 300 family of English-made movements, and there's a lot to love. You can see partial skeletonization that shows you the winding train. You can see the barrel. Screws are polished nicely. Finish is mechanical but handsome and worthwhile. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.